start getting some feedback. A more specific, formal, completed document will be distributed across the public domain for comment around the middle of September. But this is really as much a appetite whetting event as well as a familiarization event. However, before we get to that, I'm taking every opportunity when I talk with the public to really try to emphasize the need for vaccination and what we're doing here at GLA. So the pandemic continues. One of the biggest challenges that we have with this version of the surge is that we're also trying to manage our COVID positive patients while we're also maintaining our full capacity to take care of non-COVID positive patients, and that's stressing the system out. We have double digits of inpatient COVID positive veterans. The vast majority, in fact, all of the current ones are non-vaccinated. And we're getting 30 to 40 positive outpatients a week. Many of them are vaccinated, but they're not being hospitalized. So it's really important to get that vaccination. Unfortunately, we had one staff member who died yesterday. That was in the news on Channel 7 this morning, but she succumbed to her battle with COVID in Houston. She contracted her virus while she was visiting a family in Guatemala. The one thing I do want to mention is some of the changes in the vaccination policy. So if there are veterans out there who who need a third shot because they're immunocompromised in some way or have some kind of immunodeficiency, we have the capability to start doing that now. Actually, we started earlier this week for that. Down the road, just based on press conference information right now, we expect that there will be CDC and FDA approval for a booster vaccine that would be given at least 8 months after completion of the second Moderna or Pfizer vaccine. Since we're giving Pfizer here, most of the veterans who will get it from us and employees will be those who received Pfizer. So just an update there. And with that, I want to turn it over to Mr. McHenry.
Thank you. Good evening. We'll move through the slides pretty quickly. I'll do all of the GLA slides before I turn it over to the principal developer. So I'll just move quickly through the slides to give them ample time to explain the draft community plan and their roles and functions, and then to leave some time for questions at the end as well. Okay, next slide. So here's our agenda. Right out of the gate, I'll let folks know that we'll post these slides tomorrow. And then I heard Medina say at the earlier briefing that they will email out the slides to those attendees. So you'll get the slides there, but the slides will be captured with the products as well. Okay. So in this agenda, you can see the zones starting at the bottom, zone 1, the healthcare zone, zone 2, long-term care, and then additional services, the auxiliary services. We have a CLC, we have the domicile area and some other things there. Zone 3 is really the principal developer, and we'll leave that to them to explain all the activities in there. And zone 4 that wraps around there and also comes back down to the Great or Grand Lawn down in the south, and some of that open space. You can see that area as well. So this is what we contemplate as we lean forward into the principal developers community plan and what would be master plan 2022 through 2027, these 4 zoned areas. And then we can get into details later, and we'll develop those over the next few months and explaining what is in there, and we'll arrive at what is a draft master plan going forward of the 2022-2027 near the end of what would probably be September. Okay, next slide. So for those that are joining us new and haven't had experience with or refreshing a little bit on the background, 2016 draft master plan, what it envisioned, the 1,200 units, and really that area on the West LA campus is the 388 plus acres. It was really to expand needed services to veterans associated with the use of the West LA campus. We know that Building 209 had 54 units. In 2017, that was not a construction unit under the master plan as much as the already completed building was turned over as an enhanced use lease, the first building under the master plan. So it didn't go through the master plan construction process. The master plan itself calls for an update or a refresh. And we say 3 to 5 years. In one portion of it, it says 3 years, and another portion it says 5 years. So we've adopted the 3 to 5 year range. 2016 formalized the West LA Leasing Act, formalized VA's commitment. And it also brought in the OIG for periodic audits, and they've just finished their 5-year audit and likely going to get that out shortly. And it also created a veteran community oversight and engagement board, a VCOEB advisory committee that we deal pass information in exchanges every month, and then they have a quarterly community meeting. So next slide. So our purpose here today, just highlighting some of this, to drop back and talk about the draft master plan when they had an open easel or open project from beginning. Everything was on the table, how to go forward, how to go move ahead, what processes, procedures to use, what the land was to be used for and service, all of that. So there were 1,000 public comments probably gathered over the better part of a year to really refine what it is will go into this draft master plan framework or concept. The comments were considered, the secretary signed it in 2016, and we moved forward. We are committed to stakeholder engagement as we do this refresh or this revisit process for Master Plan 2022, 2027. We do need your feedback and involvement, so we appreciate you joining tonight, and we will have a slide here that will talk about other engagements. Really trying to bring the medical center, a master plan that encompasses the upgrades to the medical center and commitments there, as well as the housing commitments in the community that we're building on the north to really honor our veterans. Next slide. So in that, going back to 2016, there was a commitment right out of the gate for homeless veteran services. And I wanted to just take a second and talk about that, the 150 million annual budget that goes to the community engagement reintegration services, the 450 approximate staff that they have today, all the different things they do there. And we'll have a slide here that'll walk through some of the housing options. It's transitional from low barrier to entry right off the street all the way up to permanent supportive housing. And they touch about 16,000 homeless veterans every year in one capacity or another. We had land use reform that came along. So making sure that the land use here is veteran centric and focus, formal request process that goes through myself and the medical center director, and a land use advisory committee that reviews that. One of the things I want to touch base here is the historic and the programmatic environmental impact statements that we had to do, the federal NEPA and then the state CEQA. Those laws and processes are to preserve the historical nature of this site. The entire site here is historical, and we had to go through that, and it took longer than anticipated in the draft master plan. So you can see the timelines that are listed there of how long it took. And we did a good size of the campus so that we could get through that process and not have to do it parcel by parcel. So that we did all of that, and it came up with a larger number of how many veterans could be supported in housing on this campus. And that was really the basis for our commitment to the 1,200 housing, that we knew we could do that and that we could probably do more after that. And then that led us later to the principal developer's commitment to really bring in at least 900 and up to 1,200 units of permanent supportive housing. Some of the housing development was done outside of the principal developer and community plan that's been developed thus far. And infrastructure, we've had $10 million already dedicated. We've got 17 million more that we're going to get obligated before, well, it's back up to about 18 million closer to 19 that will get obligated before the end of this fiscal year, the end of September. So we're working hard on all those infrastructure and turnover projects on the north side of campus. Next slide. Okay, so leaning into, and I'm looking to the right to see the same slides you're looking at, leaning into zone one, the healthcare reinvestment, that's mentioned in the draft master plan as well. And we're working through the details of that with the Construction and Facilities Management Office, CFM. So as you look at the map there, you see the big gray block to the northeast corner there. That's building 500, our current medical center or bed tower. North of that, in that purple square, lot 42 is where Metro has an easement. And those that have been tracking it over the last year or so know that the easement is finally in place and that they have a tunnel boring machine underground. In about 4 to 6 years, they'll have a Metro station right there on Wilshire, which will be great for veteran transportation as well as employee transportation, connecting a better connection to the community than the current bus and road system. In here, we have contemplated designs and some plans for a new medical center to take care of some seismic deficiencies in the elevators and some other areas of the medical center should there be a significant earthquake. So it contemplates a new medical center in that orange box below building 500, just to the south of it. Across to the left side in the red box is a contemplated area for an ambulatory care center. There's areas for on the west side there, up in the blue and the green and down to the blue for 2 parking lots, one by Metro as compensation for taking over parking areas, flat surface. They've dedicated resources to providing a parking garage for VA, and then VA is contemplating its own parking garage. All of these will be for veteran employee, no transit parking allowed. You can't park your car here and then jump on the transit system. So there's also a consolidated research center contemplated in that area to correct some seismic deficiencies in buildings on the North Campus. And those are buildings we want to get out of and turn over to the enhanced use lease program and be able to really consolidate research there. We have the kitchen in the bottom right corner that's 30% complete. That's that green one. And then we have a area up there for a consolidated power system, power plant as well, and we're working on that. So we're in discussions with CFM about what the North or South Campus looks like, and the commitments over time for money and resources and the phasing of all this development. Not a lot of interdependency on the utilities on the South, although some will, when they go through, will enhance capabilities on the North, but we're dealing with the North Campus utilities separate from the South for the most part. Next slide. Zone 2, that area just above Wilshire Boulevard, talking about the things we have there for a second. We have our community living centers there. We have the domiciliary. We have some other areas that we'll still maintain, although there may be some EUL and other housing nearby or right in that area. But we do have to upgrade utilities in that area too. So we're working on that. Transitional housing in that area. So we, on the open space that you saw, those couple of green areas, there's the low barrier to entry care treatment and rehabilitative services, CTRS. That's the tenting environment we started in COVID. Continuing it today. Today's census was about, I think, 38 veterans in there. We're moving to some sort of tiny structure, tiny home type donation opportunities. So we're still solidifying that and making sure we have the right area, but leaning into that within the next few weeks to a month and getting that up and running. Also have Safe Park on Zone 1 all the way down the south edge of the campus by Ohio and the entrance there to the campus. About a dozen folks use that every night on average. They get, in both these areas, they get meals donated. In this area, they'll get, in the CTRS, they get the tent donated, the sleeping gear donated. They have a clean environment where they can either be safe park in their vehicle or in the CTRS tents during COVID, hand washing stations, a shower, other things available, and they get outreach and counseling and other services that are available to them. Emergency housing, a bridge home, shelter, the two sprung structures, and then going up to transitional housing, building 116. So the sprung structure is about 50 today. They can go up to 60 during COVID. And then we have the domiciliary, they're at about 140 today. And we have some COVID on the third floor in building 114 again. One positive and a couple of individuals who have been tested, and we're waiting to see their test results. So we're using that during the COVID period as well. And then transitional housing up to permanent supportive housing in 209, which we talked about earlier. So a lot of activity going on there, things that we have to look at in that area as we continue development on the North Campus. Next slide. Zone 3, this is really the principal developer, but wanted to put this up here and talk about, let you see some of the phasing and a little bit of what's going on. They'll go into detail in some of these areas, but you can see the services that are contemplated in here, a town center, a career center. And I think that town center is where we currently have our kitchen, and we're getting out of that kitchen on the north side and into the new kitchen on the south side that's under construction. Service coordination, mental health, wellness center, transit plaza, therapeutic gardens, community kitchen, athletic arts, social, community pantry, substance use treatment, a lot of activities and things contemplated there, which the principal developer will talk to you about. Building 209, and then we have 205, 207, and 208 are under construction. They're the really the first new construction after we went for a few years, about 2.5 years, getting the PEIS and the other historical and environmental things evaluated and signed off. So won't spend much time here, but just wanted to put this up, and we'll let the principal developer go through that. Next slide. So zone 4, those other areas, interaction and engagement areas, we have National Cemetery Administration on the eastern side, right up against Sepulveda Boulevard, and right on the other side of Sepulveda Boulevard, about 30 yards away, is the LA National Cemetery. So they've got a niche project, phase 1. They'll have another phase 2, which will go in to the north side where you see the gray block on the top left corner of their area, and a little further to the northwest. But they'll have a phase 2, and they'll add additional niches. Purple Line Metro Station we talked about, that's really upgrading transportation from the old trolley system of the 18 and early 1900 system to today's mass transit that allow veterans to connect to the community, and the community to connect to the veterans on the campus as well. Jackie Robinson Stadium is a lease for a number of years on the campus. That's just to the left or west of the niche area for the National Cemetery Administration. Brentwood School has a lease a certain period of years for fields and land to the northwest. Just to the east of the arroyo, or the little bit of a valley that disconnects a portion of the land, which is where Veterans Barrington Park is. You can only really access that land by going off campus and driving up the road and then accessing the land. So it's somewhat disconnected from the main campus, the Northwest campus. Those two areas. Veterans Barrington Park is used for the sports leagues and other activities out there. They did have quite a few activities, and specific ones geared towards veterans, but COVID has interrupted a lot of those activities. They almost got back to full swing again, and then COVID swung back around and slowed them down. Safety Park, that is the two parking lots that are out there, also disconnected from the main campus, and there's veteran employment opportunity there, and anything above the operating costs by the operator that is leased to, that revenue comes back to us. And the principal developer did a great job talking about some of the laws and revenues and our enhanced ability with the recent passing of the law to be able to use those revenues to support housing. Next slide. So opportunities for input. I wanted to put out the language in this first, kickoff meeting about the West LA Leasing Act, and this is what it authorizes buildings or parcels to provide services that principally benefit veterans and their families. And you can see the things that were contemplated here in these service leases. These are some of the things we want feedback on and we want to hear about, but by no means do I want to limit that to just these. I want to make sure we get any kind of feedback you want to give us about the master plan process, where we're going, what we're doing, the conceptual thing. We feel like we've got history behind us. We've got about a 60% plan of where we're going ahead. We're getting input from folks, wanting to start dialogue today, have a place where you can provide input, attach documents, read some more material. And then we're going to go through a process over the next several months that'll have more engagements with the entities out there, to include, the public and community and all of our key stakeholders, and also share with them a master plan version before we finalize it so we can get input on that as well. And we'll talk about the ways we want to do that, but really looking for input on whether you want certain types of housing, whether it be female housing, family housing, elderly housing, different things ahead of other types of housing, what you feel is the needs of this community. What are we going to do for food? Are we going to use shopette services here, canteen services? Do we want a community 7-Eleven or a grocery store or something on the campus? What is it we think we need in this community? Activities for folks, and of course, job training. Next slide. Okay, so this is a key slide, and we'll come back to this at the end and leave it up for a little bit while we talk. But this is the website we've created under our traditional www.westladraftmasterplan.org site, and you can go there, and that step number 1 takes you right to a tab where you can hit Master Plan 2022-2027, and that'll take you to a spot where we have that blue box in the center. Click here for master plan informational document. So in that area, we're going to have a seminal 15-page document that really leans into the history, where we're at today, and sets up a lot of the base information of what we're doing. Step 2 is a questionnaire you can go in and fill out. It has a lot of drop downs, and you'll be able to attach some documents. And step 3 is you can hit submit. At the bottom there, it says upcoming method to provide feedback, planned posting and use of the Federal Register. Once we have a good draft, probably late in September, of the Master Plan 2022-2027, once we have that out there, we'll put that material and allow for feedback through the Federal Register, and that'll be open for the period of time. So we can collect information this way. We can collect information through the Federal Register. We just don't want to open that up too soon until we have some feedback from folks and we have the actual next version of the master plan ready to share and get comments back on that version. And then we'll move to finalization. So we'll go to next slide. Okay, so I think this is my last slide per se, but it's really the timeline. So here we are. We want to get the completed master plan 2022-2027 to the Secretary's office by the end of December. That means for signature, so it's got to go through the approval process. So we're looking to get it up for approval process probably around the Thanksgiving holiday, that 3rd, 4th week in November. We're doing the kickoff meetings here. You can see when the contract to work on the master plan was awarded. You can see we're going to have an engagement number 2 in early September, and engagement number 3 late September. We plan to provide a briefing at the next VCOEB quarterly meeting, so we'll offer that to the VCOEB. The master plan town hall engagement 4 tentatively scheduled in October. So at that point, we'll be talking about what's out there for comment on the Federal Registry. And then, of course, I talked about finalization and to try and get it up there in November so it can be signed off in December. Next slide. Okay, so before we go to questions, I'm going to turn it over to the principal developer team and allow them to go through their briefing and talk about the draft community plan. And then I'll come back at the end and talk. Thanks.
Are we there?
I can hear you, Steve.
Great. Good evening. My name is Steve Peck. I'm the president and CEO of US Vets. We are one of the 3 partners in the principal development team, and you'll be hearing from the other 2 teams during this presentation. As you can see here, we have been charged.
Sorry, Steve. Can you pause a moment? We can't hear you right now.
Okay. I'm unmuted.
Can you hover out over Steve, Andrew?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I see a few messages in the chat. Some folks were able to hear Steve.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Okay, everyone can hear us.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now we're talking. Okay. Again, my name is Steve Peck. I'm the president and CEO of US Vets, and we are one of the 3 members of the principal development team, and you'll be hearing from the other 2 members during this presentation. As this slide says, we are charged with creating a community for veterans on the North Campus. And over the next 15 minutes, we'll tell you how we're going to accomplish that and the progress we've made thus far. Next slide. The 3 members of the principal development team are US Vets, Century Housing, and Thomas Safran and Associates. It is a massive job, so we brought in other partners, architects, planners, landscapers, infrastructure. A project of this size on a VA campus has never been accomplished before. Century and US Vets are longtime partners. We currently operate the Villages of Cabrillo in Long Beach, which today is the largest veterans community in the country. West LA VA is 3 times that size. So we have our work cut out for us, but we certainly have a model to follow to create the kind of community that we all envision. Next. We are a mission-driven organization. We know that we are creating really more than a community. We are creating a place where veterans feel safe, feel that they have the services available to them that will address the barriers that got them homeless in the first place. We want them to become as independent as possible. Many of them will remain on campus for the rest of their lives. Some of them will come here to recover from homelessness or other challenges and move on. Next. Before we started building, we established a set of guiding principles. First and foremost, we want to create homes for veterans. These are large, formerly institutional buildings. So we are dividing them up and creating the amenities around them that will make it feel like a neighborhood. We want to bring the services to campus that will give them every opportunity to address the barriers that have held them back in their lives or that caused their homelessness. And we're dealing with an historic district. So we want to restore those buildings with respect to the history of the buildings and really make a neighborhood that is representative of the veterans and their history and the long history of this campus. Next. So following those principles, we want to establish order on the campus and create harmony so that veterans can freely move from place to place, from building to building and service to service. We want to create a neighborhood that is part of the larger community. Put it in context so that they can avail themselves of the services on campus, but likewise move easily out into the community. And as was mentioned, there's going to be a metro station on the south end of the campus that will give them access to the rest of Los Angeles. And we'll begin building the building from north to south, concentrating buildings together, creating that critical mass, creating that community so that veterans feel very quickly that they are a part of something larger than themselves. Next. And it is even more than a community. The U.S. Vets at its larger sites creates a therapeutic community. We want veterans to become engaged in their own rehabilitation. So along with all the services and the amenities, the Career Center, the mental health services available, we have town halls on a monthly basis. We want to hear from the veterans that we're creating an environment and providing the services that are most needed by them. We have resident councils in each building. So each building gets together periodically and then comes together once a month to tell us what's going on there, likewise giving us the input. From our very beginnings, US Vets has always relied on the veterans to tell us what it is that we need to be doing to help them. And we've done this successfully at Villages at Cabrillo, and we'll create a backbone organization, which Brian will talk about a little later, that will help us do that here. Next. And I'm handing it over to Blake.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name's Blake Coddington. I'm a member of Thomas Safran and Associates, the second member of the principal development firm. We have just 15 minutes, so I'm going to talk rather quickly. And if there are any questions, I encourage you all to put them in the chat, and we can also make the slides available after this presentation. So here on the page here is our vision for phase 0. These are 4 developments either completed or under construction. At the top is buildings 205, 208, and 209, making up roughly 187 units. And then building 207 is there at the bottom. That is the principal developer's first construction project that broke ground here in early 2021. And I'll talk about that more briefly or shortly. Additionally, I want to highlight that as part of the phase 0 project, we've needed to bring dry utilities for all future housing units to the campus. So there is a roughly $10 million development project that is nearly complete with new gas, new telecom, and new power. And I'll go into that briefly. So next slide. So building 207, 60 units of housing, 53 studios and 6 one-bedrooms. You can see here on the screen the rent limits for a studio and 1 bedroom. This project will be set aside for seniors, senior veterans 62 and older. This is a historic building and contributes to the campus-wide historic district. Next slide. Like I said, the project started in early 2021. We're on track for a Q3 2022 completion. And we do have commitments of funding from various levels of government. So the city contributed money, the county, HUD VASH vouchers through the local county housing authority, and the state of California also awarded low-income housing tax credits and tax-exempt bonds that we've sold and generated investment, private investment to construct the project. Next slide. These are just some construction images, interior and exterior of building 207. I won't run through what they are, but please, if you have any further questions, again, put that in the chat. Next slide. The Bonsall utility trunk line. So as I mentioned, it's a roughly 1 mile long utility trench that brings new gas service, new power, and new telecommunications. And Bonsall Avenue and Pershing and Constitution are the three main arteries where that new service is coming onto the campus. This project was made possible through VA's minor construction funds. VA contributed roughly $10 million to the project, and the principal developer has hired a team on site to manage the work as we've continued. Work began in December of last year and is on track to complete late 2021. Next slide. Here again are some construction progress photos. The construction crew continues to advance eastward, and they're finishing up in the next few months over at the intersection of the 405, Constitution, and Sepulveda. Next slide. So this is our vision for the phase 1 developments. There are 7 or so future developments, a mixture of adaptive reuse and new construction. We really concentrated our development around the phase 0 projects to create critical mass. That, as Steve mentioned earlier, this was one of our urban design strategies. We believe that clustering this development will really help to create the community, create a sense of belonging, and this is also considered the North Village. And Building 300, which Steve will speak to shortly, will serve as a service hub for the future development and future housing at this portion of the campus. I will also mention that we are in communication with the VA about the overhaul of the wet utility system on the campus. We're supporting the VA and their efforts to bring wet utilities up to speed for all the new housing that will be coming in the next few years. Next slide. So one of the early developments in phase 1 is Building 402. TSA will be the lead developer. It's a ground up development with 120 units. We intend to apply for tax credits here in early 2022, and if awarded, start of construction would be at the end of 2022. We currently have a commitment of funding from LA County, as well as a commitment of HUD-VASH vouchers. And as Brian will mention later on in the presentation, we've applied to HCD for an additional commitment of infill infrastructure funds to help with street improvements, transportation improvements in and around the campus. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Steve to talk about a few of US Vet's next buildings.
Next slide, please. Blake mentioned the service hub. That is Building 300. On the upper floors, it will have 44 units for veterans, and we've got VASH vouchers for those units. Downstairs and in the main lobby that you're seeing there is 15,000 square feet of support service space. We have talked to numerous partners, including the VA, so that all of the services that veterans may need will be located in this building. US Vets operates the Veterans One-Stop Service Center down at Patriotic Hall downtown. That's where our homeless prevention programs are for employment, mental health, outreach, digital outreach to women. We'll be bringing all of those here to this campus, including there'll also be a food bank, veteran peers will be here, a legal clinic will be here. So all of those services that veterans on campus need and veterans off campus. We hope to make this a magnet for veterans who are seeking help on the West Side. This will be open to them to provide anything from an hour of counseling to permanent housing. Next. And this is Building 210 on the northeast part of the campus. There will be 40 units in there on the upper 2 floors. This building lays out well for a secure entrance. There is a lower level that faces to the east, overlooking the ball field. We can create a secure space there for a women's program. US Vets for many years has run a women's rehabilitation program, the advanced program it's called, at our Long Beach site. And we intend to replicate that program here for women to offer them military sexual trauma treatment, other treatment that will prepare them to then move back out into our community on campus or back out into the larger community. Both this building and Building 300 are awaiting construction completion on the South Campus. So at this point, there is no timeline as to when we will gain control of these two buildings. Next, I think I'm handing it off to Brian.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brian DeAndrea. I am Senior Vice President at Century Housing Corporation. I appreciate you all being with us this evening. Century is the third and final member of the principal developer team. Like US Vets, we're also a nonprofit organization. We were actually founded by the late Judge Harry Pregerson, himself a Marine. And to this day, we continue to be led by a veteran, Ron Griffith, who's our president and CEO. We're very excited to be playing a role here at the West LA VA. It's obviously a very special piece of real estate, and we take this role very seriously. One of Century's first projects at the West LA VA will be Building 404, which is located on parking lot 48, parking lot that fronts Building 207 that Blake just talked about. The new construction opportunity featuring 73 studio apartment homes. We've recently secured a commitment of vouchers from the county. Just submitted a $15 million application to the state of California. Recently, we secured a $1 million commitment from the Federal Home Loan Bank. And if all goes well with these pending financing applications on in late 2022. Next slide, please. Buildings 156 and 157 are historic structures that are candidates for an adaptive reuse. These are old buildings that previously served as a hospital for tuberculosis patients on the North Campus. The buildings are historic, they contribute to the district, and we recently secured a $10 million commitment from the County of Los Angeles along with 110 project-based VASH vouchers. Last month, we submitted a big application to the state of California, which we hope to hear from soon. If all goes well with our pending financing applications, we'll be in a position to break ground in late 22 as well. Next slide, please. So Steve, Blake, and I have just walked you all through a number of the pending phase 1 developments. We thought it's important to maybe zoom out a little bit and look at the purview and accomplishments of the principal developer since we've been selected more than 2.5 years ago. And what I'll share with you this evening is really been made possible by our working relationship with the VA, both the local GLA team here in Los Angeles, as well as the OAEM crew from back in Washington, D.C. The VA is our client, our biggest partner, and we're working with the VA hand in hand to make all of this possible. One of our biggest accomplishments to date is the publication of our draft community plan, which is now public. You can now view that. Max shared the website where you're able to download that and review it. Underpinning that plan was an extensive amount of community outreach to our veterans, to our elected officials, to veteran serving organizations throughout the region. And our plan very much builds upon the framework for our draft master plan that was adopted back in 2016. We look at it as essentially a roadmap to delivering on the promise of that framework for a draft master plan and ultimately fulfilling our obligations to our veterans. As part of our planning effort, we've recently secured CEQA clearance. That's our state environmental process. And then in 2019, working with the VA, we achieved NEPA clearance. So we have all of our environmental clearances in hand, which really paves the way for us to begin working in earnest on development activity. We've also been hard at work on the advocacy front. Thanks to the leadership of Congressman Ted Lieu and Senator Feinstein, President Biden earlier this summer signed into law the West LA Campus Improvement Act, that will enable and promote the development of housing and a therapeutic community on the North Campus. We're continuing to advocate for both federal and state resources. From an infrastructure perspective, we've conducted a wealth of infrastructure assessments, dry utilities, wet utilities, transportation infrastructure. As Blake mentioned, the dry utility project is coming to a conclusion, and we are supporting the VA in the launch of a wet utility project that will address significant needs that exist. Lastly, from a social and organizational perspective, we're proud to announce that we've recently hired a director of community development, Tess Banco, who is our boots on the ground. We're in the process of establishing a 501c3 nonprofit organization that will serve as a backbone. A backbone organization is one of the conditions of what we call collective impact. Collective impact is an approach to addressing complex issues like homelessness, where no one agency, whether it's a public agency or a private agency, can accomplish or solve the issue on their own. So this nonprofit organization that we'll be establishing will be tasked with convening stakeholders, coordinating services, helping to promote the sense of community on the North Campus. Next slide, please. As we alluded to earlier, our team has been very busy on the financing front. Over the past couple of years, we've been quietly assembling financing commitments that will enable us to break ground on numerous developments in the year and years ahead. Affordable transactions can sometimes take 4 to 8 or more sources of financing. It's a painstaking process, but we've been hard at work. We're happy to announce that we've secured nearly $95 million of capital to date. We've secured more than 400 project-based dash vouchers for our developments. We have more than $50 million of applications pending with the state of California, with many more to flow. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we are working very much in partnership with the VA on something that hasn't been done at this scale at any point across the country. It's really an extraordinary project, and as a result, we are facing lots of challenges. One of the biggest challenges we're facing is the availability of affordable housing financing. Affordable housing programs throughout the state and the region are incredibly competitive. They're oversubscribed. They're on different timelines. In some cases, applications for state programs have been challenged with some of the particularities of the real estate at the West LA VA. So we're working very closely with our colleagues, both locally and at the state, to try to promote regulation changes and policy changes that will allow these resources to be invested in this very special project. One of the other big challenges we're facing is that our bond volume in the state of California has been, we recently breached the cap, the federal cap. Applying for bonds is now a competitive process, and that has the potential to slow down our development activity. The good news is that there's a movement in Congress to address the bond volume cap issue, namely the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act that is making its way through both the House and the Senate. So we're hopeful for that legislation to be signed into law at some point later this year. Next slide, please. We've also spoken about some of the infrastructure challenges we're facing, both wet utilities, transportation needs. There are significant and extraordinary needs on the North Campus. Much of the infrastructure is aging and in need of significant investment. We're very grateful for the partnership with the VA, who stepped up and committed $10.5 million for the dry utility improvement project that Blake spoke about. We're hopeful that there'll be more resources like that to flow in the future. And lastly, I want to point out from a legislative perspective, we want to acknowledge again both Congressman Liu and Senator Feinstein for co-sponsoring the Campus Improvement Act. That certainly paves the way for our development activity on the North Campus. And recently, at the state level, the state appropriated capital through the recent budget that was signed into law by Governor Newsom that will provide new resources for our Phase 1 housing projects at the North Campus. Next slide, please. So as we look to the year ahead, our hope is to complete our planning activities. This engagement process that we are involved with you all is part of that. We'll be hopefully pivoting to full pre-development and construction activities as we get into the latter part of the year. We hope to be breaking ground on some of the remaining infrastructure needs on the campus, working with the VA. We will be implementing our backbone organization plan. coordinating with all of the veteran stakeholders on the campus, creating a holistic continuum of services and providers on the North Campus, not just the VA, not just our organizations, but organizations like Step Up on Second, like New Directions, like the Calvet Home, like the DOM. All of those organizations, we think, can come together to create a natural continuum of housing and services for the benefit of our veterans. And we'll continue our advocacy and fundraising process. Next slide, please. And lastly, this is our opportunity to turn to you for your help. This is a massive undertaking. We can't do this alone. We really need all of the support of the larger community. We're doing something that's very unique. One thing that we'd like to ask is for your feedback on both our amenities and the potential future name for our community. We've provided on this slide a link, a SurveyMonkey link that we would love to have you participate in. We would also love to hear your stories of progress and success and your involvement on the North Campus. We hope you will tell the story and share the good news with your friends and neighbors and colleagues about all of the activity and positive progress that we're seeing here tonight. And lastly, to the extent you're interested in volunteering, there are lots of opportunities to volunteer at either some of the organizations that we've addressed directly here or through the VA's Voluntary Services Program. And so with that, that concludes our formal presentation. We will turn things back over to the VA to moderate the Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Hear me? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I just want to take a minute here. I asked them to, we're going to mute the one microphone. Okay, I asked them to pull the slide up again about feedback. Just want to make sure we leave that up there for a few minutes while we talk. The feedback loop is the important aspect at this point. You can go in to this area and you'll be able to hit that big blue bar in the center bottom portion there that says informational document. And from there, you can hit the master plan concept paper, which is that 15-page paper. Has some of the same material you saw in the slides. The slides will be posted there as well, so you'll see that. And then going to see the principal developer's draft community plan that was talked about by the principal developer this evening. A lot more detail in there on that, so you'll be able to go through that and study those and provide any feedback. You can do the questionnaire and you can attach documents. And then as we get closer to the end of September there, we'll use the Federal Register to publish a copy of the new master plan, 2022 through 2027 version. And then we'll take feedback on that for a period of time according to the Federal Register. And I think that really gives you the background on it if you're new to this or you want to dig into some background, as well as what we see the principal developers community plan is a 60% solution that we're already moving through phase 0 into phase 1 for next year and onward, and doing some course corrections based on feedback and really getting into all those other services and wraparound things that you all would like to see as far as what this community you think needs at this point in time. And this will give us a good glide slope for the 5-year plan and really an idea of what the next 5 years beyond that looks like. And some of these things will be enduring. But the construction really goes 20, 30 years out if you look at the draft community plan. Okay, so we're almost at the top of the hour. I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to ask if there were any questions posted and give you all a few minutes if you'd like to post any questions. Okay, so I'm told there's no questions at this point. So when will the link to the video be available? So in the previous call, be the same with this call. They should email out the actual slide deck here so that you can have the slide deck. And then by tomorrow, we should have the slide deck loaded in that area where the blue button is in the center of this. So you'll be able to go in there and see it as well and get it from there. Okay, any other questions? All right, we'll wait another 30 seconds or so. Appreciate everybody's time. We wanted to do a kickoff, get folks oriented to this effort and where we're going, and really any input on any part of the process, any aspect of it you want to provide, it's all welcome, and we'll go through that for consideration as we work to finalize this project by the end of the calendar year. Okay, I'll turn it back over to Medina.
Thank you all for joining us for this evening's town hall. Please keep in mind that if you have any questions at the conclusion of our town hall, that it appears that a question may have just appeared in the chat. Yes, okay. Okay.
I get to come back. There was one more question, so I'm going to sneak it in for those folks that are still on. It's actually for the principal developer. Are we able to bring them back online to speak? It talks about what community is and how does the principal developer define community. So give me a second to see if I can bring the principal developer back online to talk about that. We have to unmute their mics.
Can you hear me? Matt, are
Yes,
you hearing
we
me?
can hear you, Steve.
Great. Well, community, as opposed to building a bunch of buildings where people are living, we want veterans to interact with each other. One of the hallmarks of homelessness is isolation out on the outside. So we are going to bring, as we said, build critical mass, bring these buildings together. There'll be gathering places. There'll be amenities, walking paths. We have an activities organizer, organizing activities, showing the World Series on a big screen TV. So those are the things that bring people together and develop healthy relationships, which is part of their rehabilitation. I'm hoping that answered your question.
Thank you. Okay, having no other questions, that should be it for real. All right, I'll close it out, Medina. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.